Hey, Waffle Gang, I do hope you're well. My name is Mark, and today we're checking out some more Reddit stories. And if you do love a Reddit story, why not consider hitting that like, subscribe, maybe that notification bell too. And let's crack on with today's first story. Much love, guys. Now, today's first story comes from ABK1998 and says, "Am I the asshole for not wanting to apologize for calling out my aunts at a wedding? I, 26 female, have been with my partner, 27 female, for 5 years, and we're getting married next year. Overall, the wedding planning has gone pretty smoothly until now. For context, there is a large age gap in my family when it comes to the grandchildren on my mother's side. My dad's an only child. My mother had me in her 20s, and my two aunts waited till they're in their late 30s to have kids, so I've just been more of an extra aunt to a lot of my cousins, as there's about 4 of them, all between 6 and 10, all girls, except for my cousin Kate, 25 female, who is the daughter of my mother's older brother. Now, I love my family, I do, but my aunts have always been the kind of parents who can never say no to their precious children, and that has resulted in them being spoiled brats. Over the last decade, there has not been one family event that hasn't been ruined in some capacity by a child having a temper tantrum over something stupid. In the last year alone, we've had tantrums over not wanting to leave a party even though the party place was closing, not having the correct flavor of strawberry ice cream at our grandfather's 85th birthday, or just getting a pack of hair bows that didn't match each other's, and many others that, to be honest, the reason why are so stupid they feel made up. And these tantrums are bad, like the full screaming, pounding the floor, and enough tears to water a field until their mothers give in to their demands. Husbands are just real walkovers, to be honest, and let their wives deal with the kids. It took a long time to even bring my partner to one of our many family events just because I always knew these tantrums were going to happen. I didn't want to scare her away. I work with kids, so I know this is beyond not normal behavior of kids, and I know the lack of discipline is to blame, but I've never been in the position to call it out because in my family, is very much if you don't have kids, your opinion of how to raise them doesn't count. But as the kids have gotten older, it's gotten so much worse. Now, onto the wedding planning. We're not having a large wedding because neither of us want it. Between our family members we want there and our friends, it's just over 100 people. My partner's family has no kids under 16, and when the idea of having a child-free wedding came up, it was clear my partner liked the idea of no one under 16, and to be honest, I was happy with it, as well as our dogs were going to fill the roles of ring bearer and flower girl anyway, and we both knew there was going to be at least one tantrum, and neither of us wanted to subject our friends and her family to those. My parents and grandparents agreed that it would be nice to have no kids for a change, and with that, we sent the invitations out. Not long after the invitations went out, we had my cousin Kate's wedding. She grew up 3 hours away and hasn't turned up to really any family events in the last decade. But her mother made her invite everyone to show off as there was over 400 people. Don't get me wrong, you could tell a lot of money was put into the event, and it was lovely, but I personally wouldn't have liked it for my day. The new husband had a niece and nephews, so they did the flower girl and ring bearer roles. And yes, there were tantrums thrown when the news broke, and it only took 5 minutes into the wedding for a tantrum to happen because one of the kids wanted to sit in the front and not a few pews back. My partner has gotten into the habit after 4 years of these events of keeping track of the tantrums on a notes app, and she counted 3 in the church alone. It's only gotten worse as it was raining after, and the kids didn't want to wear jackets to get to the car, and many tears happened. The meal wasn't much better, but thankfully we're at the head table with my grandparents away from it, but you couldn't not hear the whining and shouting occasionally throughout the meal. Things got bad when, at some point before dessert, 2 of the kids came up to me and asked why they were not invited to my wedding, as they had been for Kate. A bit stunned, I just replied that the place we're having it was only for adults. That obviously was the wrong answer because almost immediately another tantrum about how apparently their parents had promised them they'd be the flower girls at my wedding erupted. Thankfully they're small for their age, so it's pretty easy to pick them up and move them away from the head table, which was on a stage and away from people staring. While this was happening, my parents were confronted by my aunts asking how was it that their kids were not invited. My parents just repeated the same thing as I had, and this also wasn't good enough. At this point, my grandfather and I were behind them with two of their screaming children. I honestly don't know what came over me, but I blurted out, "You really cannot see why I might not want to have your children there on my wedding day. Can you please stop discussing this right now? It's not the time and people are already staring at us," and left. Well, let's just say that while most of my family agreed with what I said, now my aunts are refusing to attend the wedding until I apologize to them and their kids and invite them. Some family members think it was the wrong time to say anything or just apologize to keep the peace. But honestly, I don't want to, as I don't think what I said was that bad, especially considering the thing I knew that the groom's family were saying after the wedding, from what I heard from Kate and her new husband. But as I was reading through this, it just felt like at some point something like this was going to happen anyway. And I just almost felt relief for you when it did happen, because now they're not going to your wedding and it sounds like it's going to be quite peaceful. I think you've done yourself a favor, if anything. But Mountain Girl 60 says, "I'm dying laughing. I'm surprised everyone has let it go this long. As far as I'm concerned, you're the hero of the day. The only thing I will be doing now is contacting my aunts and telling them that I understand they are no longer coming to the wedding. So please consider their invitations rescinded, and that I appreciate the heads up early so that I can fill their spots with people who I wasn't able to invite before. And do not back down. When they start to fuss about being uninvited, tell them that it is already too late. You were just contacting them to thank you for letting you know early. But you have already invited other people, so no. Neither they nor their husbands are invited any longer. If anyone else in the family starts to make noise, tell them you have more friends waiting in the wings if they'd like to be uninvited as well." Fallout 4 Addict says, "Not the arsehole, don't even invite the parents. Problem solved. Bonus points, your wedding will be an amazing event that your whole family will remember, and future weddings within your family will more likely also be child-free because you were the first and paved the way to make it okay to keep badly behaved family members in their place, away from important life events, unless they learn how to behave. Enjoy your wedding." Megsy says, "If you have to apologize for what you said, then they have to apologize for every time their children ruined events, because keeping the peace is important. Your fiance's notes will come in real handy, lol." In all seriousness, I fully believe that some people think that kids will just suddenly know how to be functioning human adults when they turn 18. I think their only job is to placate them. Like the kids will just magically learn how to be good people. Nope, not how it works. Stand your ground, and frankly your family needs to start having a discussion of whether you want this to be the rest of your lives or not, because these kids won't get any better at this rate. Not the arsehole. Absolutely, and on the back of that comment, I always feel sad for the children in these particular situations. Yes, they might be absolute little turds right now, but the parents around them is just not helping the situation at all. And like the comment said again, they're going to grow up to continue to be little turds, because they're doing them no favors by allowing this behavior to continue, which I just find real sad at the same time. So Opie comes back in a couple of days after Christmas and says, "So yeah, Christmas happened, and yeah, it was apparently a shit show. I'd planned ahead of time to spend Christmas with my partner and in-laws who live an hour away, then celebrate Boxing Day back home with my parents and grandparents. But to my surprise, my mother contacted me late on Christmas Day, just to say the Boxing Day celebrations were called off after a disastrous Christmas meal with the family, which at last minute included the aunts and the children. So apparently they decided that as the family had been going no contact in the week since the events at my cousin Kate's wedding, they were going to turn up to my great-grandmother's house for Christmas and confront me about it to my face to make me apologize for calling out their kids' behavior. They usually do their own thing at Christmas and often go to their in-laws. I forgot to mention they are married to brothers who are two of the weirdest men I've ever met, but that's a rant for another day. Oh dear. I guess they thought if my 99-year-old great-grandmother, my mother's mum's mum, was present, I wouldn't refuse their demands. However, they failed to check that I might not be there, and according to my father, their faces when they realized their plan backfired were hilarious. Obviously, their little terrors were running rampant and screaming their heads off, and one even had a temper tantrum because there were no presents for them under the tree. The aunts had turned up in the middle of Christmas meal several hours after all the presents were opened, but apparently The kid couldn't comprehend that, according to my aunt, at one point my great-grandmother got so annoyed at the screaming, she yanked her hearing aids out. No one in the family had thought to fill her in with what had gone down at Kate's wedding. It was one of those we all thought someone else had done, so she was a bit confused at first. She knew the wedding was child-free, so she couldn't understand why they were making such a fuss about it, and to just get over it. She said she'd like to enjoy the likely last wedding she'll ever attend in peace, away from screaming children. My family has a very dark sense of humour. Between that and what I had said earlier, I think most of my family have just enough of their crazy excuses. Obviously, after Great Granny said this, they went on about their poor angels, but they didn't have much of a leg to stand on, as pretty soon after they opened their mouths, the terrors had gone into my grandmother's homemade baked Alaska and had dropped it, ruining the dessert for everyone. Apparently, my grandfather just snapped and told them to get out and let them enjoy one family event in peace, and they needed to get their children's behaviour in order if they ever wanted to be invited to another family event, as their children's behaviour was out of line and was only going to backfire on them as they got older. This man had served for over 10 years in the army and another 25 years as a police officer, and this is terrifying when he snapped, so understandably they got out of there ASAP. My great-grandmother even opened one of her fancy bottles of whiskey to celebrate. My grandfather had been one of those who did not want to disinvite them and keep the peace. He's financially contributing to the wedding, but when I got home yesterday he gave me full permission to rescind their invitations. I had originally decided to not rescind my aunt's invitations, but give them a warning that if they turn up with their children or tried to cause a scene, he'll be escorted off the property immediately. But now, after an emergency family meeting on Boxing Day, we ended up just rescinding their invitations and instead just using what we'd have spent on the 4 meals on jewellery for myself, my mum and great-grandmother as a memento. My parents and partner are 100% behind me on this, and we're lucky that our venue is owned by my soon-to-be in-laws, and with that, security is included in the cost, as they have had several crazy family member stories from renting it out for weddings and events over the last 30 plus years. It's run in-house by my soon-to-be brother-in-law, so we have full control of who is allowed on the property during the wedding. My maid of honour and bestie has also volunteered herself in the case of one of them turning up in a white dress, to be the one to take for the team and spill a glass of red wine. Her backup plan is using my dogs, both Westland Highland Terriers who will be at the wedding, who are trained to pee on command and have an accident. She has a drama teacher, so I'd be pretty confident in her being able to make it look convincing as an accident if a worst case scenario happened. In terms of if I knew kids coming up to me at the wedding was their parents' way of guilt tripping me, yes, I did know. This is far from the first time it has happened. For example, when one of the terrors had their Holy Communion, it fell around the same time my partner and I had adopted our 2 dogs. We hadn't expected to get 2, but they were inseparable and we just fell in love with them immediately and took them both home. My job requires me to work Saturday morning, so couldn't attend the church service for the communion, and there was no real way to get it off early on, so I made sure everyone knew I wouldn't be attending the church service, making sure to hand over a card with money in for the child the day before with a small gift, because apparently to my aunts money doesn't count as a gift. Anyway, later on at the meal, the sister of the child who had their communion just came straight up to me during the event and asked me why I never turned up to the church in front of everyone, and asked where was their puppy. Apparently my aunt had told him that one of my puppies was for them. Let's just say tantrums happened, and the puppy they did end up getting lasted 1 week, as now it lives with my in-laws. They hadn't pulled that stunt in a while, at least not to myself, so I guess that's what threw me off more than anything else. As with what was said by Kate's in-laws not long after I got back to the table, Kate's now mother-in-law sent us over a round of drinks to help with our growing headaches, as there was a lot of how on earth do you deal with this on a regular basis, and oh boy, they're going to be nightmares when they're older. We were also betting with the rest of the bridal party when the next tantrum would happen. My partner won betting when there would be one just before the speeches, and a few rounds of guess what the reason for the tantrum was, thanks to my partner's 4-year-long notes. Kate's in-laws also share my family's dark humour, so later in the night we were betting which would be the worst once the teenage years and all those hormones hit. Was it the most adult way of dealing with it? Probably not, but was too drunk and annoyed to care about that. Couple of comments with Opie replying to him, so the last Mongo says, glad things are working out, and just have to say, loving your great-grandmother. Opie says, Oh, truly, the woman is iconic. She also technically got this whole saga started as she set me up with my partner all those years ago. Gratified viewer says, 3 fucking cheers for grandpa and great grandma. Those two are easily the heroes of this story. Of course, after the little shits ruined dessert, I wouldn't be surprised if other relatives were getting in line to tell the aunts off. Opie says, oh yep, they ruined the dessert for basically every family member over 50. It was about 25-ish people, and a lot of them live over a day's drive away. To only get my grandma's baked Alaska once a year at Christmas, so they were not pleased at all. The thing that made me chuckle is like, I'm not sure if I should be chuckling at it or not, but grandma just like, fuck this, I'm pulling the hearing aids out, like, I'm not listening to that shit. And whilst I would like to think that was concluded for OP, I think stories like that are never going to be truly concluded. I think the wedding will come round. There will be some extra drama from someone in that family. They just seemed unhinged. But what do you guys make of this situation? Let us know your thoughts down in the comments below. And let's move on to another story. And our next story comes from the Am I the Arsehole subreddit. Doesn't have an update as yet from Fresh Ad 7431 and says, am I the arsehole for telling my dad the real reason my half sister won't be in the same room with me? I, 31 female, have a half sister, Ellen, 34 female. Same dad, different mums. No, I'm not the result of an affair. Ellen and I are not close and never have been. We only saw each other at family get-togethers. Ellen has a husband, Tom, 34. Tom is a nice guy, and when she introduced him to the family, he and my husband hit it off, and my husband ended up hiring Tom to work for him. Tom and Ellen got married and had a baby, and during this time, they started having problems. I didn't hear this from Ellen, but from my dad and from my husband, who was told by Tom. Tom then started staying really late at work, and then progressed to coming over to our house, often for drinks with my husband, and by extension, me. He became a regular visitor to our house and began unloading his problems. This went on for about 8 months until one evening Tom was quite tipsy and admitted he developed a crush on me. Understandably, this meant he didn't come back to our house. He has profusely apologized for this and we're fine now, but obviously I just prefer some distance. I guess that whole thing was a wake-up call for him because he and Ellen started going to counselling. During the counselling, he told her what had happened because Ellen called me and screamed at me for the whole situation. She said she and Tom would never be in the same room with me again after what I'd done. She made excuses for not coming to family gatherings I was at for a while before my dad confronted her, and she said I had a falling out and we weren't speaking. I went along with this because I didn't want to tell my dad the truth either. It's been over a year of this. But this all came to a head over my dad inviting both of us to our families to New Year's Eve and getting mad that Ellen wouldn't come if I was going. He started ranting at me that we needed to grow up and make peace, and if we didn't want to talk to each other fine, but not being able to be in the same room was nuts. I got sick of being berated and said I agree, but it wasn't me who started it. My dad then demanded to know what the fight was about and wouldn't let up. Eventually, I just told him. He's furious. He called Ellen and yelled at her. He called my husband and yelled at him. He is seething that no one told him and that he's been acting like things are fine with Tom this whole time. Ellen is furious with me for telling Dad, saying I did this on purpose and have ruined things with Tom after she worked so hard to fix them. I feel bad for the results, but I also feel like carrying this burden of this rift that I didn't cause was unfair on me in the first place. I've kept quiet when I didn't have to. But once I was getting heat over it, it just became too much. Am I the arsehole for spilling? Now for me in this, it may be the wording and I may be completely off on this one. But after the news came out that Tom had a crush on you and, this was a wake-up call for Ellen, and during the counselling, he told her about what happened, so we don't know if that was the full truth or not, because then Ellen then called you and screamed at you for the whole situation about what you had done. It immediately had me thinking, has Ellen been told the full truth here? Because it certainly doesn't feel like it to me. Again, that might be just a flying statement there, might be completely wrong, but it felt that way to me. But Carter says Tom has agency over his relationship with Ellen, and now he acts on his unreciprocated feelings towards you. Ellen has agency over her relationship with Tom and how she chooses to process his emotional infidelity. You have no agency in the situation, given that you just happen to exist as yourself, and Tom developed one-directional feelings while being estranged from Ellen. Her blaming you for the situation is nothing more than displacement of her own anger at Tom and insecurity in her relationship with him. She has nothing to be mad at you for. Only Tom holds that burden for his emotions and her for whatever part she had to play in that early estrangement. Not the arsehole. Midwest Panic 69 says, not the arsehole, your sister made the problem about you. Lied to your dad about what the problem was and caused a rift in the family over her own insecurity. You did the right thing in all of this, and you shouldn't have to take the heat for being the adult in the room. Bark says, not the arsehole about this particular thing, but I think you should have done your sister a solid and sent Tom home when he started socializing frequently at your house. Not because of the crush, but because presumably she was at home with a baby all the time. Holdaka says, and replies that saying, thank you, I'm so glad someone else noticed that Tom spent 8 months hanging out at their house drinking most nights while his wife was at home with a newborn because problems. And OP and her husband just enabled it. Parking B says, not the arsehole for spilling, but you're the arsehole for allowing him to come over for 8 months while your sister was home with a newborn baby. Do you know how difficult it is in those first few months? Couple that with postpartum and marital issues. None of that is your fault, but I think you guys enabled him and are now focusing on the wrong part of this. Not really about the crush, but more about the fact that you allowed her husband to escape and drink in your home without so much of a heads up. She feels betrayed. It feels a little weird that you could show compassion to her husband, but not her. But now, I'm going to turn this one to you guys. What do you guys make of this situation? Let us know your thoughts down in the comments below. Now, just a huge thank you from the bottom of my heart for getting involved in today's stories. Your love, your support, your time always means the absolute world to me. So thank you so much for being involved. And hopefully, I will see you in the next one. Take care and much love.